Hello guys, welcome to another virtual biology lesson, and we're starting a brand new chapter. The chapter will be devoted to talking about things that are helping us in order to perceive the world around us, and I'm talking about the organs of senses. The first sense that we're going to talk about and the first organ of senses is the human eye. It's quite complicated, as you can see, because it's a really complex organ, but I will try to break down the whole composition of an eye into something that is much simpler. And guys, to begin with, you have this diagram on page 196 in your textbook, which is labeled in Polish, but I will also explain that in English in this video. Guys, to begin with, the human eye, although it looks complicated and it has so many elements, in reality is made out of three layers. And those three layers are also called the membranes, czyli po polsku błony. Guys, the outermost layer of an eye is sclera, po polsku twardówka. This is the stiffest, the non-transparent layer that serves as the protective layer of an eyeball, because eyeball is mostly made of water, because the whole vitreous chamber or vitreous body, czyli ciało szkliste, is made mostly of water. So the layer that is outside needs to be stiff in order to contain the whole eyeball. But the eye wouldn't serve its purpose if it all was non-transparent, because we need some element for the light to pass through. And this is why in the very front part of an eyeball, sclera changes to cornea, which is rogówka. Cornea is this part, and it's basically totally transparent, and it allows the light to go into. The middle membrane of an eye is made, the middle layer of an eye is made of choroid, which is naczyniówka, and basically this is the layer of an eye that supplies the whole eye. As you know, every organ is built of cells, and those cells need some supplies. They need oxygen, they need to get rid of carbon dioxide, they need glucose, they need proteins in order to build and to divide themselves. So all of those are being provided via capillaries that are present in choroid. But also in the middle layer of an eye, we have some other elements. For instance, the tiny muscle that in this picture is visible in these two parts, which is called the iris, tęczówka. It's colorful. Every human has their iris in a little different color, and basically it's a muscle that stretches and flexes and relaxes depending on the amount of light that is outside. And when it stretches, it's basically changing its shape and making the opening inside it wider or just a little bit smaller, and this hole is the pupil. Pupil is po polsku źrenica, and basically that's the opening through which the light goes into the eyeball. As you can see, there is also a lens, just like in every camera, because cameras were basically built to mimic our eyes. Every camera needs a lens, and so do our eyes. This lens is not made of glass, but it's elastic. So it can change its shape a little bit in order to focus on objects that are further or closer. And they do it because of ciliary muscles or ciliary body, ciało rzęskowate, and it can be a little bit more stretched, it can be a little more relaxed, and this causes the change in its shape. And I hope that you know it from physics. When the shape of a lens is different, then the lens focuses light a little bit differently. So those elements, pupil, iris, ciliary body or ciliary muscles, lens, and choroid make up the middle layer of an eyeball. The innermost layer of an eyeball is retina, czyli po polsku siatkówka. This is the photosensitive layer, so it contains specific cells that are able to record and react to the light. So when a ray of light comes into the eyeball, it's being focused on retina, which is a really thin layer at the back of an eyeball. And guys, this is possible due to the fact that retina contains two kinds of cells: cone cells, czopki, and rod cells, pręciki. And they serve two different functions. Cone cells are very sensitive for color. So they sense the wavelength of the ray of light, and each wavelength is represents a certain color. If it comes to rod cells, they are sensitive for the intensity. So imagine when it's dark outside, after some time, your eyes get adapted to the conditions, and you cannot see colors when it's dark because cone cells are less sensitive. They need a lot of light in order to perceive color. But the intensity of light, though, even when there is very little light, it allows the rod cells to work, so you can still see shapes, you can still see objects, but it's very difficult for you to tell their color. And this is because we have around 6 million of cone cells that are responsible for perceiving color, while we have over 125 million of rod cells. This is why we can see in the dark, but our color perception is obstructed when it's dark outside. If it comes to the rod cells and cone cells, they aren't spread evenly. There is something like macula centralis, po polsku plamka. And this is the place where we have the highest concentration of cone cells. This is the place where we have the best vision, the sharpest vision, because we can perceive the most of the colors. Actually, there are 250,000 of cone cells per square millimeter. But as you can see, this is the optic nerve. The optic nerve is really important because it basically reaches, collects all the signals from all rod and cone cells and transports it directly into the brain. But it's like a wire. So the wire goes here and then it's spread evenly throughout the whole retina, but it all goes to one point. And guys, if it happens that the ray of light hits this point where the nerves are being bound together, then there are no receptors at all. No cones, no rods. This is the blind spot, czyli po polsku tarcza nerwu wzrokowego, kiedyś nazywano czarną plamką. This is the place where you cannot see anything. And actually, there are on page 197, you have an instruction on how to check the presence of your blind spot. Guys, so this is in the very shortest way all about the construction of the eyeball itself, but also eye is a really sensitive organ. So the sclera is the outermost layer is very sensitive for touch. Whenever you touch your eyeball by accident or you're just putting your contact lenses in, then basically you feel a lot of pain. You instantly have to take back your hand. This is also happening due to reflex arch. So eye is protected quite well. Eye protection. First of all, eye is protected with the eyelid. But on the top of the eyelids we have hair, which are called eyelashes. So eyelashes basically prevent any debris, any dust from falling onto the eyeball. There are also tear glands that produce tears. And tears are mostly water with some mineral salts, and also some tears have some antibacterial properties in order to clean the eye and to avoid some inflammation or infection. The tears, when you're crying, you will notice that after some time you start to have a runny nose. You have to blow out your nose because the tears that are being produced, they come from your eyeballs through lacrimal ducts directly to the nasal cavity, and from which it's being just repelled from the body. And there is also something called conjunctiva. Po polsku spojówka. This is a really, really thin membrane that covers the whole eyeball, and it's made of cells that are able to produce mucus. In order to keep the eyeball moist for most of the time, they produce that mucus, but that mucus still needs to be supplied with water. This is why our eyes produce tears. When the mucus and tears are being produced, then we have the reflex of closing, of blinking, of closing our eyes in order to spread the mucus and tears evenly on the whole surface of the eye. There is also a thing that I mentioned, which is connected to the lens that is inside, which is called the eye accommodation. czyli akomodacja oka. This is change of the lens shape in order to focus on objects that are closer or further. And guys, this is due to ciliary body that is constantly stretching and relaxing, and it's changing the shape of our lens. So far focus on objects that are far away from us, the ciliary body will make the lens a little bit flatter. For close focus, the ciliary body will make our lens a little bit more convex, wypukłe. Flat for far and convex for close. Of course, focus. Guys, and a little bit more how the image is produced. Basically, I don't know whether you know this, tool, which is the simple camera or camera obscura. This is the most primitive photographic equipment, and it looks like this. You have a box which is just empty. You have a photosensitive film on the back of the box, and you make a tiny hole in the middle of it. What will happen is that the image will be produced even without a lens if the hole is really small, but it will turn out later, you should know it from physics, that once the rays of lights enter the box, they will cross, and what you will see on the photosensitive film will be the picture that is upside down. It's smaller and it's upside down. The same thing happens with our eyeball. So we have the eyeball, which is more or less round. We have the lens that is inside. We have the pupil through which the light goes into, and we have the retina, which is on the back of the eye. And when you see, for instance, this candle, the rays of light enter your eyeball. Maybe I should mark it a little bit bigger. Yeah. The rays of light enter your eyeball. They hit the lens. Then they are being focused. Of course, they are always straight. I'm just mocking it a little bit. And what happens is that you see an image that is totally upside down. Our brains constantly see the world upside down, but the nervous impulse is being processed by our brain in order to turn it around. So the thing that we physically see is something totally different than what our brains make us think we see. And guys, what happens in the eyeball that the light is refracted, załamane, through the lens. The picture that we see can be described as rotated and downscaled, czyli odwrócony i pomniejszony. Rotated 180 degrees and downscaled. And what's even worse, this picture that we see is completely flat. The picture is 2D, two-dimensional, which means that we can only see 2 dimensions of what we see. We can see its height and we can see its width, but we cannot see its depth. How is it possible that we are able to perceive the depth? Because we clearly see how the items are being located in space. We can say what is closer, what is further. How is it possible? Guys, the key is that we have two of the eyes and they don't see exactly the same thing. They are slightly tilted, so they see slightly different objects from different angles. And what our brain does, it just basically takes the pictures from both eyes and it melts it together in a 3D scan of the environment of our surroundings. So this is again just an illusion, but it's working pretty well. This is why cameras, like in smartphones, there are multiple lenses, so the phone can also perceive the depth. I have a proposal for an experiment. If you want to check it, try to close your eyes or just, I don't know, use a piece of material to cover your eyes, just like pirates did, and try to walk like this for a few minutes. After some time, you will feel a little weird because with one eye only, you will not be able to tell what objects are further, what objects are closer. Except for the situation where you know it, where you have the acquired reflex. But in just try doing this. Maybe that could be interesting because you really have the feeling that something is wrong. So the image appears to be flat to you, totally flat, and you cannot say what is closer, what is further. Okay, guys, so this is more or less it for now. Please carefully read the instructions and check the assignment page because there is something waiting for you. Oh, and you have to prepare for the test that will take place on Wednesday. So, yes, this is definitely something to do. Stay safe and stay at home.